'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck. I hope you're having a rip-roaring day. Weather's a little wonky today, I think. We got some rain in the forecast, and it's nice, and it's a little cloudy out there and sunshiny. But anyway, well, of course, I'm originally from northern Michigan, and I bitch a lot about northern Michigan media because that's how I started this website almost 27 years ago. Yeah, I can't believe my child will be 27 years old pretty soon. Yeah, same age as. Hopefully, it will outlast people like Kurt Cobain and Janis Joplin and Amy Winehouse and all these other rockers that died at 27. But anyway, but Northern Michigan radio has really gotten bad in recent years, especially because the owners of Northern Michigan radio stations really don't know their ass from the hole in the ground. And tragically and unfortunately, yet another radio station in Northern Michigan has been sold to Jesus. Radio station WSBX 94.5 Mackinaw City just filed papers with the FCC to be sold by current owner Whiskey Sours Broadcasting, named for the fact that the guy who owns it, his real name is Billy Sours. So yeah, Whiskey Sours Broadcasting. So yes, a type of an alcoholic beverage sold to Northern Christian Radio, 200,000. So WSBX right now is simulcasting another radio station from Sault Ste. Marie called The Bridge. And the station has like a classic hits style format. And 95.1 will still be on the air, but 94.5 will eventually serve as one of the formats from Northern Christian Radio. So basically, Northern Christian Radio is the Northern Michigan equal, sadly, to K-Love. K-Love, oh boy, gas prices went up to $4.29 again. Thank you, Trump. So, I just drove by two gas stations. They're both at $4.29 a gallon. Thankfully, I filled up the other day. So, I want to tell you, so this is the story. So what happened was a few years ago. So 94.5 in Mackinaw City has been around since the early 90s. It was originally at 94.3. It was a kind of a weak station called Fudgie 94. It was owned by a guy named Bob Naismith. And then Bob sold the station to Del Reynolds. Del was buying up a bunch of stations at the time. He moved the station to 94.5, boosted the wattage, and turned the station into a smooth jazz format called Coast FM. Then he added on 95.5 in Traverse City, and 93.9 in Mayo, just Gaylord, Grayling area, basically. So what happened was next, Dell decided to sell his stations for $7 million, originally to a company called Caliber Communications. The deal did fell through, so Caliber reorganized as Northern Star Broadcasting. And Northern Star, one of the principals of the company, was a former NFL player from the 60s. He played for the Packers and the Minnesota Vikings. His name, by the way, was Palmer Pyle. And Palmer sadly died a few years ago. He had dementia, and I believe that it was caused by getting sacked in the head a few times. Because that's the sad story about the NFL, sadly. So the rest of the story was that they flipped the Coast FM stations to a modern rock format called The Zone. The Zone was kind of a wimpy station because sadly and unfortunately the people who were running the show were saying, yeah, you know, kick-ass rock and roll ain't gonna work out in northern Michigan. So that's exactly what happened. They sucked for a few years, and then they flipped to a harder, edgier rock format, and the ratings went up by a ton. Yeah, you know, that's the problem with Northern Michigan radio. They listen to consultants and not to you and me. And that's the way it's always been, folks. It's about what the consultants want because they think they're that somebody from Florida is the expert and not somebody from Northern Michigan, like me. So anyway, rest of the story. So the Zone grew up here in 2000. They did pretty good for a while. They actually kicked KLT's ass in the ratings for a little bit, and then a few years later, Del Reynolds decided to buy, got into management at Northern Star. I guess Northern Star had some financial issues. Part of it was because, I heard a rumor that it was, they were really losing a lot of money due to the economy and what was going up in the UP. They owned some stations in the UP that weren't doing very well. So Del Reynolds was put in charge of the company, and one of the first things that he did was he demoted the Zone to just one signal, 95.5, and put a soccer mom AC format called Star FM on 94.5, and it didn't even do well. So back to the rest of the story. So, and then a few years later, 94.5 flipped to Classic Rock the Bear because Del then decided that the Zone needed to be bequeathed into a more of an active rock format as Real Rock 105 and 955. So then what happened was 94.5 was the Bear for a little bit, and then Del sold it. So this is the story. Del decided to purchase his company, his old radio stations, back from Northern Star. Or better yet, he was going to be buying Northern Star Broadcasting, but what happened was Del decided to... So this is what happened. He built a radio station in Sheboygan called WCHY 97.7, and the FCC said, oh, you're over your limit now. Okay, so this is what Del had to do. He realized that he had to get rid of one station, so he actually got rid of two. Well, he got rid of two, but gained one. And guess who he did the business with? The Bishops. That's right, the same fucked up family whose patriarch is a convicted felon, good old trucker Randy Bishop. And of course, his wife is in deep doo-doo because she decided to monkey around with the voting records in Antrim County, and now she's suspended. So this is what happened. They had a station in Nonaway, 106.3 WYPV. Del made the switch. So this is what happened. Del traded 94.5 in Mackinaw City and 93.9 in Mayo for 106.3. So now the Bishops had 94.5 and 93.9. They actually sold 93.9 to a religious group called Strong Tower Radio and kept 94.5, but then they sold to another group. This time around it was and that group was called Strong Tower Radio. There we go. And so what happened was 94.5 was then sold 94.5 was then sold to WJML and John Yob, but then Yob was running out of money. Yeah, Yob ran out of money, and I guess he decided to lease his stations out to Black Diamond Broadcasting. And then next thing he did, of course, all the FMs they had, including 94.5, became simulcasts of Q100. So then what happened was Q100. So then Yob decided to sell 94.5 to Whiskey Sours. For a while, 94.5 WSBX had its own format, and then 94, and then he made this deal with this guy from Sault Ste. Marie to simulcast, and yeah, so now Whiskey Sours has said, okay, we're done with Mackinaw City, so let's go ahead and sell this beast to Jesus. We've given up. So the sad story is, and this is a sad, folks, this is one of the worst things about radio. It's the fact that too many radio stations are being sold to Jesus these days. You got, and they include stations that have been around for a long time, like even well-established stations like WLUP in Chicago, WPLJ in New York, WAAF Boston, WLUM in Milwaukee. All these stations were around forever and ever, and they were like, yep, we're going to be sold to Jesus. And the sad truth is, some of these radio companies, they made the mistake of selling their souls due to the fact that, yes, this is the problem with radio. Radio doesn't seem to care. Terrestrial radio doesn't seem to care about their listeners. And this is why you end up with company. It's like, this is why people jump to Sirius XM or Pandora or Spotify. They care. They don't give a shit about you, the listener. And they don't know what the hell they're doing half the time. Look at what happened several years ago in northern Michigan. So the Goki family out of North Dakota, they had WKLT, they had the Fox, and they had two ESPN stations. And they ended up having to sell. So they tried to sell all their stations in one fall swoop to the Coins, and they realized they couldn't do it. The Coins, I guess, were not financially fit to buy these stations, so they ended up selling them. So this is what happened. They sold them one by one, and when the dust was settled, 2 out of the 6 stations ended up in the hands of they were still commercial stations. KLT 97.5 went to the Bierman family, Midwestern Broadcasting, which also had WTCM and WCCW and Z93. And 106.7, the former Peak. That station ended up, with Trish McDonald Garber, who turned it into a country station. Of course, Trish also has KHQ, Bob FM, and Light 96. And so what's going on? So then 94.3, one of the former Fox signals, that station went to CMU. So now it's a CMU station. They've always wanted to have a station in Traverse City, and they got it. But the 3 other stations all went to Jesus. 98.9, and the former KLT station in Petoskey. That ended up with K-Love, although they decided to choose another format for 98.9, which is worship music, and then you got 92.5. 92.5 briefly was owned by Bill Gleish, who has a bunch of stations in the UP that are not doing well financially, and he ended up selling to Northern Christian Radio. And 105.5, Northern Christian Radio, once again. So, in Northern Christian Radio also purchased WLGN in Traverse City and their affiliated stations. And from what I heard, they only purchased those stations for like $1. It was like, how did this happen? Is Good News Media, did they struggle? So now this Northern Christian Radio, they have 3 formats. They have WLJN, which is worship music and preaching. They have The Promise, which is soccer mom AC Christian music. And then you have The Source. So here's the story with The Source. I was in Traverse City a few years ago, about a year or two ago, and I was sitting in the parking lot at Costco, just flipping through the dial, just for kicks. I put it on 104.1, and a couple of things disturbed me. One, on the RDS, they called the station, they misspelled the name, SORCE. There's a U in there somewhere. It's SOURCE. And they spelled it wrong. What the fuck? They couldn't even spell their own fucking name. And here's another thing that was beyond sickening. So they were airing some idiotic talk show where a woman was calling in and trashing President Biden, and then saying stuff like, yeah, the Democrat Party is going to indoctrinate our children. Yeah, I got news for you. So do you like the fact that we got into another war over oil? Do you like the fact that gas prices they just shot back up again here in Grand Rapids? $4.29 a gallon. Although Casey's is $3.79. Yeah, it went up a ton. Like 50 cents in one day. Do you like the fact that we have a president that's against building windmills, saying that it kills birds, and yet the truth of the matter is that, he redid the reflecting pool at the Washington Monument, and look at what he did. Look at what's going on now. They're dumping hydrogen peroxide into the pool, and it's killing the birds. Midas Touch even posted a picture on their website of a baby duck just floating, dead. It's heartbreaking what Trump has done. He doesn't care about you or me. He's a liar. He is a scumbag. Shame on him. I hope that he'll wake... Yeah, he's not going to wake up, folks. This is why we need to vote. I mean, that's what these right-wingers think. Transgender. Okay, how about this? How about worrying, how about not worrying about what other people think and worrying about yourself? That, folks, this is the type of audience Northern Christian Radio is going after. Not the most godliest people out there. They want you to believe that if you're a Democrat, you're going to hell. And, a lot of the programming, I think, comes from Salem, too. And I told you the story about Salem. They had to, they made the movie 2,000 Mules, and they had to take it out of distribution after it was discovered that, there was a guy who sued because they caught them. Yeah, he was in the middle of one of their lies. You see, Radio has been dying for years because we've given too much power to the wrong people. We've given power to, too much power to big corporations. We've given too much power to the religious right. And it all started when Nixon's Supreme Court ruled that, you can't use certain words and phrases on the air. We got to protect kids. They don't care about the First Amendment, folks. They seriously don't fucking care. And then what happened, and then of course they got rid of the Fairness Doctrine, which further limited First Amendment rights. And then they got rid of limits as to how many stations people can own. They even screwed up, and of course thanks to the Janet Jackson nip slip, it even furthered what you can and can't do on TV and radio. And now, this is why Howard Stern jumped over to satellite radio, folks. He got tired of being censored. These fuckers don't care about what you want or need. It's about how much they can make. And sadly, look at what's happened. Nobody wants to invest in terrestrial radio anymore. Even SiriusXM was about ready to purchase iHeartMedia, and guess what happened to them? Guess what happened to iHeartMedia? The deal ended because SiriusXM, they're doing good, and iHeartMedia, they're struggling because they got an old model that doesn't work anymore. And you know what's going to see, folks? That's what happens when the FCC fucks up and plays around. Everybody loses except for the religious right, and they sure as hell want everything. And they want to, go after the dumbest people out there and tell them that if you're a Democrat, you're going to hell. If you like gay people, you're going to hell because, we put the word homosexual in there in the Bible back in the 40s. Yeah, I told you last time about the fact that they didn't even put the word homosexual into the Bible until the Red Scare of the 40s. So that's what it boils down to. So now 94.5 in Mackinaw City is going by the wayside. It's going to be another Jesus station, but you know what? Thankfully, I have SiriusXM in my car stereo. When I'm driving across the bridge, I'll just crank up Octane or First Wave or Liquid Metal or any other awesome station that they have. Fuck the rest. Okay? All right. That's all I have for right now. I'm not going to do a long podcast today. I got stuff I got to do. So anyway, I'll talk to you later. Good day and good luck. Have a good day, everybody.